Welcome to the SoftCo Leaders Series. As you probably guessed, I'm not Susan Spence. My name is Daragh Byrne and I'm Chief Marketing Officer at SoftCo. Today, I have the unenviable job of standing in for Susan on today's episode of the SoftCo Leaders Series. Today's topic is all about high-performing teams and how to lead and manage them. And I'm delighted today to be joined by SoftCo brand ambassador, World Cup silver medalist, Olympian, and captain of the Irish women's hockey team, Katie Mullan. Katie, thanks a million for joining us. How are you?
Hi, Daragh. Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure. I'm good, thank you. I'm settling into 2023 and training hard and building towards another big year for us on the hockey team.
Well, looking forward to diving into a bit of what lies ahead for you guys in 2023. But I want to get straight into it. So as you know, the Leader Series is all about getting people at the top of their game to talk to us about their insights into leadership, both in business and in sport. Now, before I start, you do need to know that I've never played hockey in my life before. So I promise I'll try and keep the stupid questions to a minimum, but do bear with me. So firstly, I need to ask you about that phenomenal performance back in 2018 at the Women's World Cup. You guys went into that tournament as underdogs, but there must have been something about the team mindset and the mindset of those individuals on the team that helped you get to coming away with the silver medals from that World Cup. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we went to the World Cup in 2018, we were ranked 16th in the world, and there was only 16 teams at the competition. We sort of had been knocking on the door of qualifying for a major tournament in sort of the previous 6 years, but we'd never quite got over the line. And so the timing was really everything for us. In the build up to the tournament itself, we'd gone on a couple of trips. We'd gone on a trip to Germany where we beat them, and they were sitting at, I think, world number 5 at the time. We'd beat Spain a couple of times. We'd beat USA before, but these were all in games that weren't capped, or like they weren't in major competition. So we sort of knew we had it in us, but nobody else was aware of that. And I think we took real confidence from that going into the tournament. And then the other thing was, I suppose for us, we had that Irish mentality of sort of giving it everything because we didn't know if we'd ever play in another major tournament. We knew that this was a history-making moment for hockey in Ireland. So all of those things definitely stacked up as well. And I think one last point I'll make is we just came together as a group really well because it was an unknown for everyone in the group. So it wasn't like one of us knew what we were doing and the next person in the changing room didn't. We all kind of leaned on each other for that support because it was such an unknown territory. And I think that in turn just made us such a strong force together.
Yeah, I remember being in Portugal at the time with my family. I remember watching the progression of the Ireland team and kind of in disbelief, to be honest, but it was phenomenal. What a great experience it must have been for you guys and the whole team. That tournament was one of a lot of highs, but clearly over the last 7 years, there's been a number of lows as well. How do you balance that? Like, how do you get the team motivated? But also an added-on question is, there must have been a huge amount of expectation following the World Cup. How do you manage that expectation as well?
Yeah, definitely. So I suppose for those who don't know, when we went to qualify for Rio, the competition went to a penalty shootout against China. We were in probably the best position going into that game, and we came away and we lost in sudden death in the penalty shootout. But I suppose after that, we had sort of this monkey on our back that shootouts weren't for us. And, they had been the reason why our dream hadn't come true to go to the Rio Olympics. And I suppose we turned that around and went to the World Cup and won a quarterfinal and a semi-final on shootouts. So I think for us, that was just a massive learning in that you really, it's cliche. You hear that you learn so much more from your defeats than your victories. But when you live that experience, I think it helps you really motivate yourself after the big losses and the big defeats, because you know that the growing that you do from those is what you need in order to be successful the next time round. So that's definitely one thing. And then the motivation after the 2018 World Cup was easy actually for us. Well, I wouldn't say it was easy, but I suppose for me as captain, it was something you were coming away thinking like how we just got projected into the media eye. Hockey was going off the Richter scale around Ireland. And I suppose you're questioning, like, well, how are we going to get everyone back together on this journey? And I remember one of our first training weeks back after the competition, one of the players sort of commenting and saying, you know, we started this journey to become Olympians. And although we've done something really special and spectacular, we still haven't achieved what we set out to in the first place. And I suppose that was a real sort of, yeah, you're dead right. Let's get everyone back together and let's get going again. So I think it's the power within is what motivates each and every one of us. The power within the group and the culture. And every time we kind of pull on an Irish jersey, whether it's to play Scotland up in Belfast or whether it's when we get to go to Argentina next month, there's always that pride in representing Ireland that's quite motivating for most of the team.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point about kind of motivating the entire team, and I get that. It makes complete sense. But a team is made up of individuals, and you know, it's balancing kind of the needs of some of those individuals with the broader need of the overall team. I remember there was a previous episode of the Leader Series where Susan interviewed Ronan O'Gara, somebody whom you know, one of a SoftCo brand ambassador as well. And Ronan, the question put to Ronan was, how do you manage the superstars or the so-called superstars of a team? And his response I thought was quite surprising. He said that actually managing the superstars of the team is relatively easy. It's the tier 2 and tier 3, which is what he referred to them as, players that can be a little bit more challenging. How do you find that? Because it can be difficult managing individuals within a team.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose with regards to leadership, there's so many different styles and approaches. And there's a leadership style, it's called situational leadership, and it's being able to switch from one to the other. And for every individual, they require a different type of leadership. So you have certain individuals that require transactional leadership, which is very much give them stats and targets and goals and get them to chase them and achieve them. And then there's transformational leadership, which is more so about how you communicate with someone to build them up, and how you sort of inspire them through storytelling or past experiences. And the key is being able to switch from one to the other depending on who you're talking to and who you're communicating to. And then you have a whole other layer, which I've found really interesting challenge for me is now you have the next generation, and how they receive leadership and what they need is totally different to what I sort of grew up knowing. So there's so many different dimensions, but the thing for me first and foremost is to know my teammate as an individual. So the more time I can get going out, going for a coffee with them, find out what's going on in their personal life, just really getting to know them as an individual and what makes them tick is probably the most powerful tool, because I'm not going to get it right 100% of the time. And, you know, you make mistakes all the time as a leader, but once you know someone on a personal level and they have empathy for you and you have empathy for them, it just changes the whole thing. And it also makes you far more aware of how you need to adapt depending on who you're talking to. So there's a lot of dimensions to it, but that's kind of it in a nutshell for me.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and it's something that obviously you see in business. And I know you're doing an MBA at the moment, and I'm sure these are things that are cropping up all the time in the studies that you're doing. But there's so many similarities between the challenges that you face in terms of not the challenges, but how you manage individuals as part of an overall team. And I think you're absolutely right. It's about understanding what makes those individuals tick to try and get the most out of them without losing sight of what the overall goal is for the team. I want to take you back a little bit further now, and I want to understand, how did you get to become captain of the Irish women's team?
Yeah, so I became captain in 2017. I was only 24 at the time, and unfortunately, our captain at the time had a bad knee injury, Megan, and so um, our coach at the time, Graham Shaw, he was sort of trying out a few different potential captains, and we sort of formed a captaincy group. There was four of us, and pretty much we weren't sure how long Megan's injury was going to go for, so we weren't sure if it was an interim thing or if it was going to be a long term thing, and the four of us rotated the armband, which was very challenging, to be honest. Way to sort of start off the tenure, because I suppose, you know, four females captaining a team, no one want to step on anyone's toes. Then you're kind of in that place. Well, you're asking, well, is any of us really leading? Because we're kind of not really, not really stepping forward. And I remember when it was my turn to captain one of the games, and I just remember waking up that morning and thinking, just have no regrets that you didn't step forward or you didn't say something. Just nail today as if you're the captain and you don't have a regret at any point in something you didn't say, and just be sort of forward facing and lead by example. And we went out, that was a quarter final day, and we won that quarter final. And then Graham, very grateful to him, gave me the opportunity then to wear the armband beyond that. I remember him saying to me, if we keep winning, you can keep wearing the armband. So if that wasn't motivating enough for me, I don't know what was. But yeah, I suppose I remember at 24 looking around the change room and thinking, you know, there's players in here with a heck of a lot more caps, more experience than me, and much older than me. And I remember feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome. And I think it's funny now that I'm a bit older and I'm reading a lot of autobiographies of sports people, and that's quite a common feeling when someone new gets a captaincy role. And actually, it took me about 18 months until I sort of sat down and had quite honest conversations with some of those senior players, and they told me that, you know, I was nuts for thinking that it wasn't the right role for me. And I suppose that just gave me a huge amount of confidence. But I always have said to myself that I'm going to make mistakes, and especially as a 24-year-old in there. But I was so lucky that I'm now 28 and I learned all of those things quite early on, and now I'm in a really good spot with it. And yeah, I still get things wrong, but they probably don't take as much out of me, and I move on a lot quicker than the younger version of me did.
Huge amount of pressure for somebody at that young age as well. Phenomenal to think that you could take it on the way you did. How did you manage those others that had been on captaincy rotation with you at that time? Because there's obviously going to be few that were disappointed they didn't get chosen by Graham.
Yeah, I suppose the big thing, and I've always said this about our group, and it's so undervalued, is that there are so many leaders that have come through Irish hockey. And I think we sort of, for about 10 years prior to going to the World Cup, there was a group of players there in Ireland that trained. We only ever trained together on Sundays. We all played our club games, woke up on a Sunday morning, drove from wherever you were based in the country, were on a pitch for 6 hours, then did your regionals on a Tuesday night and a Thursday night whilst working all week. And that builds so much character in you as an individual, but also in a group. And I think that the characters within the group then were built through those kind of 10 years of really, really tough slog, when maybe we didn't have the resources and the funding that we're now so grateful to have. And I think within that, you know, built a huge amount of support around one another in the group. And for me, having that level of support from my teammates, you know, regardless of whether they had been in the running for that captaincy or not, they always put the team first, and they always just wanted me to do well so that the team could do well. And I suppose we've always had a very strong leadership group. And I always say this, but like, I am the lucky one that just gets to wear the armband at the end of the day. everyone's voice is heard in the change room, everyone's voice is heard in the huddle before games. And that's the kind of environment and culture that we have, that I'm very, very grateful to be a part of.
It all sounds very perfect, Katie. Like it all sounds as if you're all one big happy family and there's never anybody upset or anything like that. Surely there's been situations over the past number of years where there's been clashes and things like that. How do you manage clashes between players? Because it's invariable. It's going to happen.
Yeah, I think there's definitely clashes, and there's definitely uncomfortable moments in team meeting rooms and in reviews after games and in training as well. Like we take lumps out of each other in training, but it's all about ensuring that they're managed in a way that they don't get out of control, and everyone being aware that those are massive growth moments. So I like any time we come out of one of those, you see a change or a transformation, whether that's in an individual, in a relationship between two players, in a relationship between a staff member and a player. And those moments have huge impact just once they're curtailed in the right way so that they're managed. Then you see massive change off them, like Aisha McFerrin, one of the best goalkeepers in the world. Some of the conversations you have with Aisha after a game when you've made a mistake in a penalty corner are some of the toughest conversations that I've had as a player. But damn sure as I have not made that same mistake again and let her down. And so if we were all nicey and lovey-dovey, you never have those frank conversations. You never learn those lessons. And again, that's something that we have a real hard nut culture and hard nut environment built up over a long period of time with that. And now you have, obviously, we've had a lot of retirements in the last 18 months. So now you throw an 18-year-old into that who maybe hasn't been in that environment before, and all of a sudden you have to manage it. And there's maybe a few tears or a few tough days for that kid. But once they get to the level that we need to fit in with the culture, they thrive and they grow. And I remember young Sarah McCauley, she came to the Olympics with us. And I remember after the Olympics and the girls retired, Sarah had only been in the squad, I think, a year before the Olympics. And we sat in a room, and it was the new group together for the first time after Tokyo. And we had a lot of new faces and a lot of youngsters, and we were talking about our culture. And Sarah spoke up and she said, I won't lie, at the start, I found it really hard, but now I get it. And she sort of said to the young new players, you're gonna find it hard. You're gonna have to ride the wave, and people are quite frank and direct with one another. But I get it now, and I know why we need to do it, and it's invaluable. So just put your seatbelt on, put your big girl pants on, and jump on board because it's worth it. And I suppose that was a huge thing for us as senior players to see Sarah, who'd gone through that journey, speak so positively about it.
You mentioned a few minutes ago actually about the staff and the management of the squad as well. If you think about your role as the captain, you're the link between the team and the backroom staff, the coaches. So again, like in business, and I don't necessarily like this phrase, but it's about managing up and managing down at the same time. How do you manage that? How do you deal with that? Because again, that can be tricky.
Yeah, I suppose you're representing, between 18 and 25 strong-minded women, and you are often the voice in the room to represent them with the staff group. And at the same time, you are constantly wanting to drive the principles and the values that the staff want the players to perform with. So it is a huge challenge. You're managing a lot of relationships, but it's something that I've very much grown through in the past number of years. I think when I'm talking up, I'm always referring to performance, what I feel from the player's point of view will help add to performance and will be of value in order for us to perform better. And then when it's coming the other way from top down, you're very much sharing experiences. So if a coach is having a conversation with a player around something and it's not quite landing, I'm referring back to, I remember whenever I was, 22 and this situation happened, and then I'm going to that player and I'm sort of telling the story or telling the little journey that I went on to help them see it from another perspective. So that's probably one of the main things. But again, it's a no regrets thing. I'll never walk away and regret that I didn't say something on the player's behalf, whether that leads to a tough conversation or a couple of days to get through that. It's tough and it's challenging, but I always think in the long run, nothing should be left unsaid, especially in a high performance environment. And that's something that I imagine, hopefully when I go into business, I imagine I'm going to have to like curtail my language on a little bit to make sure that I don't fall out with too many people. But yeah, in high performance sport, you kind of have to act. You have to act quickly and act now. So yeah.
Yeah. So there's obviously certain qualities that make a great leader. And I'm not going to ask you to tell me what you think those qualities are, although I wouldn't mind some guidance. We're struggling to find the right captain for our under-13s rugby team in Greystones at the moment. Can't quite identify who it should be. But do you think those qualities are qualities that you're born with? Do you think they're qualities that can be nurtured or evolve over time or can be taught?
I definitely think, in terms of nature versus nurture, I definitely think there's a bit of both. I think you learn a lot more than what you're born with, especially in your early years. I mean, for me, I had two older brothers who definitely challenged me in the back garden for a number of years growing up and sort of built my competitive nature. And then I think of through my teenage years, the captains who had the greatest influence on me were those ones that, you know, they led by example on the pitch. So you've so many captains that, talk the talk, but maybe don't walk the walk. And that's something I feel very strongly about. Is I think it's because I'm a very visual learner. So I always responded best off something that I seen rather than what I heard. And I think that for anyone growing up, whoever they are led by or captained by has the greatest influence on what leadership style that kid will then adapt growing through. And for me, that was definitely when I think of my early years in Ballymoney Hockey Club and who the captains were and kind of how character was built in the changing room. They always used to joke, we weren't bullying each other, we were just building character. Which is a difficult conversation to have now with the younger generation, I find. But geez, I sound very old and I keep referring to the younger generation, don't I? But yeah, it's definitely, I think in your early years when you have that first experience of being led or being captained, that probably has the greatest influence on how you will then lead yourself.
So some of those Ballymoney captains would have been inspiration for you. Anybody else out there in either business or sport that you would look to as being role models over the years for you?
I was very, very fascinated by Jacinda Ardern, the president of New Zealand. I mean, she's only someone that I kind of really followed in recent years since COVID and how she led New Zealand. And I just think as a female in such a powerful position, what she's done for females and the way she's led and the way she kind of got hammered time and time again, but stuck with her guns and stuck with her gut was something I really admired in her. So she's probably one outside of the sporting field that I definitely thought paved the way and in a very fantastic way.
Yeah, a role model for so many, I'd say. So it would be remiss of me not to talk about technology, Katie. This is the ad. This is the 30-second ad that everyone has to endure. No, listen, we obviously develop technology that improves productivity, performance, visibility, amongst other things for organizations. What role has technology played in sport? Like, what sort of technology do you guys use for the team?
Yeah, so I think technology for us is the 1 or 2 percenters
Mm.
that make a huge difference. So I think at top level sport, everyone's making the same sacrifices. Everyone's training, 4 to 6 hours every day. But it's technology that allows you to recover better. So anything that we'll use on a rest day to track our recovery, reporting back to the staff in a very quick and efficient way through technology. We also then have our GPS statistics. So coming off, like actually getting live statistics in the game as we're playing, when you've hit your max speed, how much high speed running you've done. It allows the coaches to make decisions, based off, well, we can get another 5 minutes out of Katie because her GPS stats are telling us that we can. And then scheduling is another huge thing that technology has had a big impact on. Gone are the days where when we were away on camp, you used to have the manager's bedroom door would have the daily schedule written
Yeah.
on a sheet of paper on the back of the door, and now the schedule gets pinged out on an app that we use every morning on Kairos. So there's huge differences, and it's those little 1 or 2 percenters that maybe don't seem that big, but as a high performance athlete, when you're so used to everything being so structured and laid out, it's those things that make life a lot easier that make actually a huge difference.
Very good, very good. And tell me about the year ahead. So, big year. What are the team goals for 2023?
Yeah, so we have our Paris qualifier. So we'll work backwards. We have our Paris qualifier in January 2024. So this year is a huge prep year for that. And we've got a fantastic calendar of hockey in order to prepare for that. We were in Spain last week and we're heading to Argentina next week. So I've never been to Argentina for a hockey trip. But anyone I know that has been has talked about it for at least a decade afterwards. So I'm very excited to go there next week. It's going to be 30 degrees. It's going to be tough for our fair skin, but it'll be brilliant. We're playing 4 games against them. We're also playing Chile. And then we come home from there. We have a invitational Nations Cup tournament in May. We then have a Europeans in the summer. And then we have a Nations Cup towards the latter end of the year in either September or December. So it's fairly jam packed, but everything is very much tracking towards that qualifier next January. And we're also aware that there is an opportunity at the Europeans in the summer. And the winners of those continental competitions get an automatic qualification spot for the Olympics next summer. And I suppose a European medal is something that we've spoke about at the last couple of Europeans that we went to, and that would be something that I full belief that this group can achieve. So we'd have our eyes set on that as well.
Brilliant. And an MBA on top of all of that?
For my
How do you fit
sins,
it all in?
trying to squeeze an MBA into that as well. But yeah, it's been another fantastic learning experience, and I think that the big difference, I suppose, I've always played hockey with Irish players, apart from a short stint I did in Germany, but the culture element and the cross culture element in an MBA program, it's fantastic, and it's a whole other kettle of fish for me, which I'm really, really enjoying and thriving in.
Brilliant. So we're nearly there. Just a couple more questions. How do you switch off, Katie? Most people turn to sport to switch off, but how do you switch off?
Good question. Classic answer is the sea, the ocean. I love it. I surf not terribly well, but I love surfing. So getting my wetsuit on, surfboard under the arm, and going out and sitting in the waves for a couple of hours is a big love of mine. And I'm blessed. I'm from a beautiful beautiful part of the country called the North Coast, where there's lots of beaches, and the sea air is good for blowing away the stresses and the worries. So yeah, definitely getting up home and into the sea.
Brilliant, brilliant. So something Susan asks on every Leaders series, I'm going to ask you the same question. So what are your top 3 leadership tips?
Top 3 tips are don't dwell on mistakes, have no regrets, and always present with confidence.
Brilliant. They're fantastic. Listen, Katie, thank you so much. I've learned a huge amount today. I just want to wish you and the team huge success in 2023, and not just the ladies team or the women's team, the men's team too, who SoftCo also sponsored. But best of luck to you and the team this year. Continued success with your studies, and you're going to have an unbelievable career ahead of you. Thanks a million for your time.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Katie.